The Galactic Council's annual diplomatic gathering on Xerion Prime was supposed to be a routine affair. Representatives from 12 different species had assembled to discuss trade routes, territorial disputes, and the usual bureaucratic minutiae that kept the galaxy spinning. The grand amphitheater buzzed with the characteristic sounds of interspecies communication: clicks, whistles, harmonics, and the occasional growl. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, observing the proceedings with the patient demeanor that had made her one of Earth's most effective diplomats. Humans were still the newcomers here, having joined the Galactic Council only 3 standard cycles ago. Most species still viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and mild condescension. Another primitive species that had barely crawled out of their gravity well. The day's agenda was interrupted when Warlord Krex of the Vorthak Dominion stood, his massive frame casting a shadow over the nearby delegations. The Vorthak were apex predators from a death world that made even the most hardened species nervous. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could tear through starship hulls, they commanded respect through fear. "The human delegation questions our territorial claims in the Outer Rim," Krex growled, his voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems. "Perhaps they do not understand what it means to face a true predator." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The Vorthak had never been challenged so directly, and their response to perceived disrespect was legendary. Several ambassadors began reaching for their communication devices, no doubt preparing to contact their security details. Sarah stood calmly, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering alien around her. "Warlord Krex, Earth acknowledges the Vorthak as formidable hunters. However, our concerns about the Outer Rim settlements remain valid regardless of physical intimidation." Krex's eyes narrowed to predatory slits. "You speak of intimidation, little mammal. Your species knows nothing of true predators. On Vorthak we hunt creatures that would make your nightmares flee in terror." The chamber fell silent. Even the usually boisterous Zentaurian trade representatives stopped their constant chattering. This was precisely the kind of confrontation that could escalate into a diplomatic crisis, or worse. Sarah smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both diplomatic and slightly unsettling. "Warlord Krex, would you be interested in meeting one of our apex predators? I believe we have one aboard our diplomatic vessel." The confusion was palpable. Humans were known for their fragility, their need for environmental suits on most worlds, their laughably short lifespans. What apex predator could they possibly possess? Krex's laugh was like grinding stone. "You amuse me, human. Yes, bring forth your apex predator. Let us see what evolution produced on your soft little world." Within an hour, the amphitheater had been cleared of all but the most essential personnel. Security protocols were activated, and medical teams stood by. The remaining ambassadors watched from behind reinforced barriers as Sarah returned, leading something on what appeared to be a simple rope. The creature that emerged from the diplomatic vessel was unlike anything most of the assembled species had ever seen. It stood roughly half Sarah's height, covered in golden fur with powerful muscles rippling beneath its coat. But what struck the observers most were its eyes, intelligent, alert, and focused entirely on Sarah with an intensity that spoke of absolute loyalty. "This is Max," Sarah announced cheerfully. "He's what we call a German shepherd, one of our apex predators." The Vorthak delegation exchanged glances. This creature, while clearly powerful for its size, hardly seemed threatening enough to warrant the elaborate precautions. Krex stepped forward, his claws extended. "This is your apex predator? I could crush it with one hand." What happened next would be discussed in xenobiology classes for generations to come. Sarah reached into her pocket and produced a small, spherical object. "Max, you want the ball?" she asked in the universal tone that transcended species barriers, pure, unadulterated joy. The reaction was instantaneous. The apex predator that had walked into the chamber with dignified purpose suddenly transformed. Its tail began moving in rapid oscillations. Its entire body seemed to vibrate with excitement, and it began making sounds that could only be described as pure happiness. Sarah threw the ball across the chamber's open floor. Max exploded into motion, his powerful legs propelling him forward with a speed that made several ambassadors flinch. He caught the ball mid-air with reflexes that would have impressed a Vorthak hunter, then immediately returned to Sarah, dropping the ball at her feet and looking up at her with an expression of absolute adoration. Again, Sarah laughed, throwing the ball in a different direction. For the next 10 minutes, the assembled representatives of 12 galactic civilizations watched in stunned silence as one of the most diplomatically tense situations in recent memory dissolved into a human playing fetch with her companion, but it wasn't just the play that left them speechless. It was the relationship they were witnessing. This creature, clearly a predator, clearly capable of violence, had bonded with the human so completely that its greatest joy came from pleasing her. The trust between them was absolute, the communication seamless despite the apparent lack of shared language. Warlord Krex finally spoke, his voice unusually quiet. "The creature, it hunts for you?" "Max would do anything to protect me," Sarah replied, scratching behind the dog's ears. "But mostly we just enjoy each other's company. Humans have been partnering with creatures like Max for over 15,000 years. We call it domestication, but really it's friendship." The implications hit the assembly like a kinetic bombardment. Humans hadn't just survived on a world with apex predators. They had convinced those predators to join them willingly, not through domination or fear, but through mutual affection and respect. The Zentorian ambassador was the first to break the extended silence. "Your species befriends its predators?" Sarah grinned, the same unsettling smile from earlier. "Oh, this isn't even our best example. You should see what we did with wolves." As the diplomatic session resumed, the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The humans were no longer viewed as the soft newcomers to galactic politics. They were the species that had looked at evolution's most dangerous creations and decided to become their friends. Warlord Krex never challenged human territorial claims again.